What drives a Florentine nobleman to walk barefoot through Italy's poorest villages, carrying a cross taller than himself? How does a man who could have lived in silk and splendor choose bleeding feet and frozen nights among forgotten shepherds? Why did the great cities of Italy forget his name, while mountain villages still whisper it with tears? This is the story of Blessed Anthony Baldinucci, the aristocrat who traded a senator's palace for a missionary's road, and whose wooden cross became more powerful than any throne. Florence, 1665. The city of Michelangelo and Medici breathed art and ambition. In a palazzo near the Arno, young Antonio Baldinucci grew up surrounded by marble columns and silk tapestries. His father sat in the Florentine Senate. Their name opened doors across Tuscany. Servants bowed. Merchants competed for their favor. The boy's future gleamed like the golden dome of the Duomo. Politics, marriage to nobility, a life of influence and ease. But something stirred in the child that palazzo walls could not contain. While other nobles' sons practiced fencing, Antonio knelt in the chapel. While they discussed commerce, he whispered prayers. His tutors taught him Latin and philosophy, and he absorbed it all, but his eyes kept drifting to the crucifix. There was a hunger in him that banquets could not satisfy, a thirst that Tuscan wine could not quench. At 16, he made his announcement. "I'm entering the Jesuits." The palazzo erupted. His father's face went red. "You're throwing away everything. Our name, our position, your inheritance." His mother wept. Friends called him mad. The Society of Jesus meant poverty, obedience, obscurity. It meant sleeping on boards instead of feather beds, begging instead of commanding, serving instead of being served. Antonio's response was quiet but unshakable. "I'm not throwing anything away. I'm trading bronze for gold." The Jesuit novitiate stripped away every comfort he'd known. The silk clothes became a rough black cassock. The soft bed became wooden planks. The servants became memories. He fasted until his stomach cramped. He knelt until his knees bled. He obeyed men who would have once bowed to him, and in all of it, he found not misery, but joy. Something ancient and true was waking in his soul. Years of formation followed. Theology that stretched his mind, philosophy that sharpened his reason, Ignatian spirituality that set his heart on fire. He prayed through the spiritual exercises and emerged transformed. The nobleman was dying. The missionary was being born. A single conviction grew in him like a flame. He must reach those no one else would reach, love those no one else would love, go where no one else would go. The palace he left behind grew smaller in his memory with each passing year, until it seemed like a gilded cage he'd been blessed to escape. But the Jesuit order had something in mind for him that no palace could prepare him for. Ordained in 1695, Father Anthony awaited his assignment with burning anticipation. Rome glittered with basilicas and cardinals. Florence still called to him with cultural splendor. Surely the order would use his education, his noble connections, his gifts. Instead, they sent him to the villages. Not the charming hill towns tourists would one day visit. Not the prosperous market centers. The forgotten places. Villages clinging to Apennine slopes where roads turned to mud paths. Clusters of stone houses in Lazio and Abruzzo where priests came once a year, if at all. Places so remote that Rome might as well have been on the moon. The people there, shepherds who couldn't read, farmers who'd never seen a book, women who knew more about folk magic than the creed. They'd been baptized, yes, but that was often where instruction ended. They prayed to saints whose stories they'd never heard. They feared hell, but didn't know the gospel. They were good people, hard-working, honest, but spiritually starving in a land overflowing with churches. The Jesuits had a strategy: popular missions. Send priests to re-evangelize the countryside. Ignite faith where it had grown cold. And Father Anthony's assignment was clear: bring Christ to the villages time forgot. He didn't protest. He didn't ask for a better posting. His heart leaped. This was exactly where he wanted to be. He began his preparation with a carpenter in a small town outside Rome. Together they fashioned a cross, not a small one to hang on a wall. A massive wooden cross, 12 feet tall, heavy enough to make a man stagger. Anthony ran his hands over the rough wood, feeling splinters catch his palms. This would be his companion, his banner, his throne. His first mission took him into the mountains of Abruzzo. He walked for days, the enormous cross balanced on his shoulder, switching sides when one grew too raw. His feet, unused to such journeys, blistered and bled. He arrived at a village so small it barely had a name, his cassock dusty, his face sunburned, the cross towering above him. The villagers stared. Children pointed. Old women whispered. Who was this madman who'd walked out of nowhere with a cross that belonged on a church steeple? Anthony planted the cross in the town square. He stood beside it, and he began to speak. His voice was gentle but clear. He spoke of a God who loved shepherds enough to become one, of a Savior who walked dusty roads like theirs, of a mother who understood their struggles because she'd been poor too. Simple words, true words, words that fell like rain on thirsty ground. Within an hour, the square was packed. Within 2 hours, people were weeping. By evening, they were lining up to confess sins they'd carried for decades. And so began a mission that would span 22 years and transform thousands of forgotten souls. Father Anthony's missions became legendary and controversial. He didn't preach from comfortable pulpits to well-dressed congregations. He turned village squares into theaters of salvation, the night sky into a cathedral ceiling, and the entire town into his church. A typical mission began with drama. As dusk fell, Anthony would organize a torchlight procession. Villagers, rough men who rarely prayed, women who'd almost forgotten how would pick up candles and follow him through narrow streets, singing hymns many were learning for the first time. The flickering light, the voices rising in the darkness, the massive cross leading them, it stirred something primal and holy in every heart. Then came the sermon. Anthony would stand by his cross in the marketplace, and his entire being would become the message. He wept openly, describing Christ's passion. His voice thundered, denouncing sin. He fell to his knees, begging people to turn back to God. He painted heaven so vividly that children dreamed of it. He described hell so powerfully that hardened men trembled. And then came the most controversial part, public penance. Anthony would bare his back and use a discipline, a small whip on himself, drops of blood mixing with tears, all while crying out for mercy for the sins of the village. Modern sensibilities recoil. But in that time, in that place, for those people, it was shattering. The nobleman, the educated priest, reducing himself to nothing for their sake. The message was unmistakable. If sin demanded this, how great must God's love be that he suffered infinitely more? The makeshift confessionals couldn't handle the crowds. Anthony would hear confessions for 6, 8, 10 hours without pause. He prioritized the worst sinners, the bandit everyone feared, the woman everyone scorned, the drunkard everyone avoided. If Christ came for the sick, Anthony would go to them first. Reconciliations followed. Enemies who hadn't spoken in years embraced. Families divided by feuds reunited. Stolen goods were returned. The village, sick with sin and division, would be healed. Sophisticated clergy criticized him. Too theatrical, they said. Too emotional. Not dignified. Makes a spectacle of religion. Anthony never defended himself. He simply continued. The results spoke louder than critics. Thousands converting, churches rebuilt, sacraments restored, lives transformed. One priest, visiting from Rome, watched a mission and approached Anthony afterward. "This is excessive." Anthony gestured to the crowd, crying, praying, changed. "These are simple people. I speak to them in ways they understand. The cross was excessive too, but it saved the world." The critic had no answer, but not everyone welcomed a man who made sinners weep and saints dance. Success made him dangerous. In an era when Enlightenment ideas were creeping into Italy, when anti-clericalism simmered beneath the surface, a priest who moved peasants to passion threatened those who preferred religion quiet and controlled. Local powers resented his influence. Bandits, disturbed by conversions that made their recruits repent, plotted against him. One night, riding between villages, Anthony learned that a group planned to ambush him on the road ahead. His companions urged him to turn back. Anthony refused. Instead, he rode forward toward the danger. When the bandits stepped from the trees, weapons ready, they found not a cowering priest, but a man radiating peace. Anthony dismounted. He walked toward them, hands open, eyes steady. "Brothers," he said, "I know why you're here, but I have something to tell you before you do what you came to do." They listened, uncertain, and he spoke, not about their crimes, about God's mercy, about Dismas, the good thief who hung beside Christ and heard, "Today you will be with me in paradise," about how it's never too late, about how God was waiting for them, not with a sword, but with open arms. By dawn, the would-be assassins were on their knees, confessing. Some became his protectors, accompanying him on dangerous routes. The story spread. Nothing could stop him, not even death threats. But opposition came from within the church, too. Priests jealous of his success whispered that he was too emotional, manipulative, unseemly. The criticism stung more than physical danger. To be attacked by those he served, those who should have been his brothers, it was a hidden cross, heavier than the wooden one. He never responded, never defended himself, just kept walking, kept preaching, kept carrying the cross. The physical toll mounted. Walking barefoot through Italian winters, his feet cracked and bled. Infections came. He ignored them. Sleeping in fields and stables, he developed a chronic cough. He dismissed it, eating whatever poor villagers could spare: stale bread, thin soup. His stomach was ruined. He continued. He could have stayed with wealthy families who begged to host him. He chose the poorest homes, the coldest floors. People called him mad. Others whispered, "Santo." The cross he carried was not just wood, it was growing heavier with every step. "22 years of missions, hundreds of villages, thousands of miles on foot. The human body has limits, and Father Anthony had exceeded them all. By his 40s, he looked 60. His back was permanently bent from the cross. His feet, scarred and misshapen, could barely fit into shoes, not that he wore them. His face was weathered like old leather. His hands trembled with exhaustion. Chronic pain was his constant companion. Joints aching, stomach rebelling, lungs rattling with every breath. Fellow Jesuits begged him to rest. "You've done enough. Take a year. Recover." His answer was always the same: "I'll rest in heaven." Where did the strength come from? Not from food, he ate like a bird. Not from sleep, he slept like a soldier between battles. Not from health, his body was a catalog of ailments. Yet he continued with supernatural energy that defied natural explanation. Miracles accompanied him. A mother brought her dying child. Anthony blessed the infant, who immediately recovered. A man confessed a sin and found a tumor vanishing the next day. He would look at someone and know their secret struggles, their hidden sins, their deepest needs, knowledge that could only come from God. His strength was the Eucharist. Every village mission, no matter how small the church or how humble the tabernacle, he would spend hours in prayer before the Blessed Sacrament. There, in the silence, he found what food could not give: the strength to continue, the love to endure, the fire to burn, even as his body turned to ash. By 1717, at 52, it was clear. He was dying. His fellow Jesuits could see it. Villagers could see it. He could see it. The machine was breaking down. But the spirit inside burned brighter than ever. "More souls need to hear," he would say, planning the next mission even as his body screamed for rest. That autumn, he received an assignment, a mission to Pofi, a small village near Frosinone. He knew with that prophetic insight that had grown in him that it would be his last. He told his superior, "I will complete this mission and then I will go home." He meant heaven. His companions tried to convince him to stay. He was already walking toward Pofi, the cross, one final time on his shoulder, a body that wouldn't stop carrying the message that had become his life. November 17. The road to Pofi stretched before him, but every step was agony. Fever burned in his bones. His breath came shallow and painful. The cross felt heavier than ever, or perhaps he'd finally grown too weak to bear it. But he walked, one foot, then another, the way he'd walked for 22 years, the way Christ walked to Calvary. There was no turning back now. Pofi was typical of the villages he loved, small, poor, forgotten. Stone houses clustered on a hillside. Farmers and shepherds. Simple people with simple faith that needed rekindling. His kind of place. With the last of his strength, he planted the cross in the village square. He steadied himself against it, and he began to preach. His voice, once thunder, was now a whisper, but the villagers pressed close to hear. He spoke of mercy, of conversion, of hope, of a God who never forgot anyone, no matter how small their village, how simple their life. Every word cost him. His body was shutting down, but the message had to be delivered. Midway through, his legs buckled. He collapsed. Strong arms caught him before he hit the ground. They carried him to a peasant's house, a simple room, a hard bed, exactly what he would have chosen. Word spread. The Holy Father was dying. Villagers filled the small house, spilled into the street. Fellow Jesuits arrived to attend him. He made his confession, received the last rites, made his peace with God. Though there was little peace to make, he lived his entire adult life preparing for this moment. No fear touched his face. Only gratitude. Gratitude for the cross, for the villages, for the souls, for the grace to spend himself completely in God's service. His final words were simple: Jesus, Mary. On the 7th of November, 1717, as the sun set over the Apennines he'd walked for decades, Father Anthony Baldinucci breathed his last. The room fell silent. Then, quietly at first, the villagers began to weep, not with despair, but with the grief of children who'd lost a father they'd barely known, but instantly loved. They buried him in Pofi, in the small church where he'd preached his last sermon. Immediately, people began coming, seeking his intercession, reporting miracles, calling him Santo. The great cities didn't notice. Rome didn't write about it. But in the mountains of Lazio, in the forgotten villages of Abruzzo, they remembered. In 1893, 176 years later, Pope Leo XIII beatified him. The church officially recognized what mountain villagers had always known. The man with the cross was a saint. The wooden cross stood in the square long after he was gone, a silent witness to the man who would not stop carrying it. Blessed Anthony Baldinucci's name appears in no history books of Italian politics. No piazzas bear his name in Florence. No monuments mark his birthplace. The palace he left behind has forgotten him. But in small villages across central Italy, old women still tell stories of the priest with the enormous cross, of the nobleman who slept in their grandparents' stables, of the night heaven came to their forgotten town and everything changed. His legacy is written not in marble or parchment, but in transformed lives, in families reconciled, in sins forgiven, in souls saved, in villages that learned, through one man's radical witness, that God had not forgotten them. He proved that the gospel sometimes requires scandal. While others preached comfortably, he embraced the scandal of the cross literally. While others served the influential, he chose the invisible. While others protected their dignity, he sacrificed his for souls. His life asks us uncomfortable questions. What are we unwilling to sacrifice for the gospel? Where are we unwilling to go? Whom are we unwilling to love? What crosses are we refusing to carry because they're too heavy, too shameful, too costly? The message of Blessed Anthony Baldinucci thunders across 3 centuries. The gospel is worth everything, every comfort, every security, every dignity, every breath. And those whom the world forgets, God remembers. The villages nobody visits, He visits. The people nobody loves, He loves. And sometimes He sends a nobleman with a cross to prove it. That cross still stands preserved now as a relic in Italy, but spiritually planted in every forgotten place, every overlooked person, every heart that wonders if God remembers them. Anthony Baldinucci carried it there. And it's still speaking. You are not forgotten. You are loved. And if one man can walk these mountains for you, imagine what God Himself has done. The Florentine palaces crumbled, the wooden cross remained. And somewhere in the mountains of Italy, His footprints are still visible in the dust, pointing always toward the next village, the next soul, the next mission, pointing toward the only cross that matters, the one that saves.